what I want to talk about are squats. This is an exercise that lots of folks are given somewhere along the way in their process of improvement after stroke. And there are ways that a person who is a stroke survivor, who has one side more affected, can make a squat more beneficial for themselves. And so I just wanted to touch on some of those opportunities to make this the best exercise for you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just have a simple splint on this arm, and we'll say this is my more affected side as a point of reference. Okay, so one thing I want you to think about is the initial movement of the squat. So what do you have in your mind that you're going to be doing in this exercise? So a lot of times, let me get these back a little bit. So a lot of times folks feel like a squat is just bending their knees, right? So just bending up. And actually, there is a way to do this exercise that helps you improve your control for sit to stand and squatting deeper, even getting down into the floor. So starting at the beginning with those mechanics is going to help you be able to use this particular exercise to get better and better at more challenging things. So a squat is really not just about bending up your knees. What you really want to think about first is moving your rear end back, okay? So my weight shifts into my heels. For this today, my toes are coming up a little bit. So a squat is really about pushing our rear back, then folding up, okay? So that if I use my toes as a point of reference, when I do a squat in this way, rear coming back and bending, my knees are not going to be out over my toes. So if I put a line straight up from my toes, my knees aren't anywhere near that yardstick, okay? If I just think that I'm going to bend my knees, you can see I have to put this yardstick out at my knees. They're way ahead of my toes. So the control is going to be better if you start to reach your rear end back. And so a cue that I like to give folks that I work with is to actually have some sort of target that you're reaching your rear end for. So this is just a bar stool, and I might have them stand 3 or 4 inches in front of it. And what they're going to do is reach their rear end for the stool and then come up. I'm going to keep my chest nice and tall, but I'm going to think about reaching for the stool. Now you can do this near a countertop, a rail, so that you don't have to worry about your balance as you get a feel for what that movement is like. Okay, so that is one cue. The next cue is to start small in your squat movement. And that's why having a target that's fairly tall can be helpful in the beginning, because you don't have to worry about how deep do you go. You don't have to think about going deep. You're just worrying about having that control. And when you can do that, lightly touching, you could find a target that is lower, or you could think about going part way into your squat. All right? So starting small in the movement is going to be more beneficial. And another thing to be thinking about in this movement, again, is this movement's going to be more about your hips than your knees. And so what I mean is, as you reach your bottom back and you fold up, what I tell folks, when you come up, you're going to think about tucking your rear end up under you, all right? Versus when you come up, thinking about straightening your knees. For somebody who tends to have a knee that snaps back, slams back, or hyperextends, right? These are all words there. Thinking about coming up out of the squat more with your knees is only going to contribute to that more. Actually, some good work to help reduce that knee hyperextension is practicing the squat and focusing on tucking your rear as you come up. If you do that, your knees are going to straighten. You don't have to worry about trying to actually straighten your knees, okay? They'll come along for the ride. So sometimes a cue, in addition to thinking about tucking your rear end, sometimes I'll tell people, like the zipper of your pants, You're going to think about pushing the zipper of your pants forward, okay? And not really focusing on straightening your knees at all. Another thing that can happen for stroke survivors practicing the squat is people may tend to start more away from their more affected side, and they may end up performing that squat where they're not using their more affected side as much as they could. Now, this may be a great way to start if you haven't really been using that side at all really well up on your feet, then keeping your weight shifted off of it, but being mindful about how far apart your feet are could be helpful. We're going to come back to foot placement in just a moment. So just really be mindful if you're working on this squat, think about having yourself in the middle. If you're up for the challenge, you could be shifted a little more toward your more affected side. You could use a strategy of leaning toward a sturdy object. So for example, I could lean myself toward my rail. Sometimes I'll have people be at a countertop. If it's a countertop, I prefer that it be the end, near the corner, because if I lean into this, my arm, I may bump into my arm, I might put pressures on my arm that aren't going to be great for my shoulder, and it may be in the way of me actually shifting far enough over. So what I'm going to do is be close to the end. I could lean toward it as I do my squat, thinking about reaching my bottom back, and then tucking my rear as I come up. I could always, if I feel unsafe, I can move a chair next to me to hold on for balance as I practice this movement and coming up. The final two things I'm going to talk about are our feet and our shoulders with this. So first of all, feet. When I coach somebody on doing a squat who's a stroke survivor, I'm going to have them keep their feet shoulder width or less. Now, I really don't have people do them with their feet together, but just a few inches, to maybe a few more, but not super wide, not larger than shoulder width. The reason is that if we're trying to be sure that we're getting our weight supported on our more affected leg as we do this, then we don't want to have our leg we feel great on way out away from this one, because we may tend to stay towards our leg that feels better, and that's a long way over to come back. So having your feet a little bit closer together is going to be helpful. The other thing is I'm going to stay nice and tall through my spine, okay? And then as I stick my rear out, I reach it back for that surface. I'm going to keep my shoulders forward so that if I went lower into my squat, if I had more control, my shoulders stay forward, forward, forward. As I come up and think about tucking my rear end, my shoulders are going to come back at the appropriate timing. Okay? So that was a handful of tips to help you make the squat a little bit more beneficial for your improvement after stroke if you have one side that's more affected.